Submission is a bad word these days. People who submit are often looked down upon by society and seen as weak. This is reinforced by people who abuse the Bible verse about wives submitting to their husbands. These people are running around with their Bibles trying to hit someone on the head saying, "Submit, woman, submit!" But in actuality, submission isn't weakness. It requires incredible strength. Submission is not about equality. In Ephesians 5, the Apostle Paul gives instructions for how to live the supernatural Christian life. He begins with instructions to the church body as a whole and concludes with specific instructions to husbands and wives. A lot of people quote verse 22, which says, "Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord." But usually those same people skip over the previous verse, which says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." Paul instructed the believers, all the believers, to submit to one another because of the reverence they had for Jesus. This means that husbands and wives are to submit to one another. Then Paul lays out the family order as God designed it. A husband is the head of the wife in the same way that Jesus is the head of the church. Think of it like umbrellas. There's a great big umbrella that's over all believers, and that umbrella is Jesus. Now, under that is a smaller umbrella that's the husband. And then under that is a smaller umbrella that's the wife. And lastly, the household and children fall under the wife's umbrella. So the children should submit to Jesus and to both parents as authority figures. The wife submits to Jesus and to her husband, both of whom are in authority over her. And finally, the husbands submit to the authority of Jesus Christ. Does that make sense? And if one of those umbrellas isn't fulfilling their role, it causes problems that trickles all the way down. I'm going to single out the guys here for a moment because I think we have a real problem in our country with absentee husbands and fathers. Sometimes they're traveling all the time for work or just at the office late on a regular basis. Some men have walked away from their family responsibility. Others frequently retreat to the golf course. I'm not going to lie, there are days that it's really tempting to shirk our responsibility as husbands and fathers. But if we leave a void there, it impacts our wives, our children, our churches, and eventually even our community. But most guys haven't been taught how to be a godly husband. And since we're so good at asking for directions, we certainly aren't going to ask for directions on how to be a godly husband. To be transparent with you, I remember when I first went to Bible study 35 plus years ago. You see, I grew up in the church and was active in the church, very active, but I didn't really ever study the Bible. So when I attended my first Bible study, I discovered that I didn't know anything, and after about 5 or 6 weeks, I dropped out. I was in leadership at this church and was embarrassed that I didn't know what they were talking about each week. Of course, I couldn't admit that at the time, I just felt guilty. But growing up, no one ever showed me how the study of God's Word would transform your life. I had wonderful parents who were very active in the church too, but I never really watched them or saw them studying the Bible. Maybe you can relate. Guys, it's okay that you may not know much about how to be a godly husband, but now's a great time to start to change that. You may be thinking, but she doesn't respect me or she doesn't submit to my leadership. Well, I dare you to love her sacrificially and see what happens. Women are built to respond. So if you aren't getting the response from your wife that you want, examine your approach and ask God to give you wisdom on how to be more godly as a husband.